And thank you. It's nice to be with you all today. Clearly, these are interesting times in which we live. I grew up always thinking of that as a blessing. I learned subsequently that it actually has its origins as an old Chinese curse. But whether you think of it as a blessing or a curse, actually at the heart of that interesting time in which we live is, in fact, the rise of the machine or technology. It's amazing that it's already been over 10 years since Tom Friedman wrote his iconic work, The World is Flat. We always liked that when I was the CSO of Dell because he had a chapter in there on supply chain, but I also liked it for other reasons. I think Tom was one of the first individuals to opine that what would characterize our world today more than anything else is the way in which traditional boundaries of interest were going to grow ever more porous. Whether that was the distinction between domestic and international, cyber and physical, public and private, you name it. The way the world is evolving, actually that porosity just keeps increasing. And I can think of nothing that actually accelerates or exacerbates that porosity than the rollout and the development and the evolution of the internet of, I like to say, everything. That just has increased significantly. The threat vectors through which the risks and the malware can now strike us, and it's making or adding a level of complexity to what was already a very complex challenge. And having been in the security profession now for almost 20 years, I did 10 in academia, 10 in government. I'm one of those retreads that hopefully will emerge here, and then back into the private sector for 20 years. But nothing is added to that level of complexity, I think, than what we're seeing now in this internet of everything. Kevin Kelly just wrote his book, The Inevitable. Some of you may have read that. In fact, he actually adds another layer of complexity to the rollout of the Internet of Everything. If you think of all these things now also connecting to the cloud and compounding artificial intelligence on top of all those things. And so, again, exponentially we're seeing the environment growing ever more interesting. And, of course, very interesting for the private sector.
It is.
At ADP. Maybe you can already share with us some of the insights you've gained as to how you can deal with that complexity in terms of the efficacies of your programs internally, particularly as the private sector works to manage human capital, and human capital gets tied in here very quickly in terms of the complexities. Your thoughts?
Yeah, John, especially in a commercial entity that is essentially an ecosystem of ecosystems. If you think of what at least companies like ADP do, we're providing these human capital management, payroll, services across multiple industries, we become a part of their operating environment, and in turn, they become a part of ours. And as we look at the rise of the machine, as we say, or loosely federated the term IoT or IOE, it's really coming home to roost. I was in Barcelona a few weeks ago, and one of our CTO researchers got on stage, and he did an interesting demo. And it's a demo I knew was coming, and I had seen the technology work, but what he did is he took out his phone, and he said, "Hello, work." That's our version of Siri. And she said, "Hello, Roberto, what can I do for you?" And he said, "I'd like to take vacation on this date." Seems like a simple request. So what that bot did on his embedded device is essentially went out and said, "Here's what's in your calendar. Would you like me to move those things? You can take vacation. But by the way, John Smith, who has the same job description as yours, in this division is on vacation at the same time. Should I notify him?" Okay, I've done that. Right? It was really that simple. But that was 11 different business systems that one bot went across. It was really impressive on stage, and I started sweating on the side. Right? Because I spent the last 25 years enabling cyber defensive operations and data protection systems to make sure that we have absolute control across our money movement, our HCM platforms, and all of those things. And in 1 year of dynamic research with an IoE embedded technology, we now have to be extremely careful and concerned about how we're deploying legacy technology and new technology to protect and ensure access and data movement and things of that nature. So we're spending a lot of time embedded up front, at least in the commercial sector, with deploying security professionals, engineers, developers inside these new technology farms that we're building. Some of them call them innovation centers, but they're farms of new technologies that businesses are building. So our focus is truly at that very basic organic level within those development arms. And that's how we're able to keep up. My concern is we've talked previously is how do you, that's one technology in one business, in one ecosystem. As that truly continues to push forward and fast, how do you get ahead of the controls and the integration between those ecosystems?
Right. Mike, I know in DOJ they have, and we heard Jeanette talk a little bit about some of the things that the government are doing and advancing. I know over at DOJ you had your Internet of Things analysis group. You want to share some insights based on the work that they've done and some of the things that you think government might yet do in addition or in complement to what Jeanette shared with us already?
Let me get my DJ microphone here going. So what we've done at Department of Justice, and again, I'm in the National Security Division, is we saw the cybersecurity threat evolving as you all have, and the proliferation of devices connected to virtually everything. And someone, I think, wrote an op-ed recently in the Washington Post calling it the Internet of Hazards is a good way to think about it, I think. And we talked to other departments and agencies that do have regulatory responsibilities, and those, for example, at DHS that Jeanette mentioned, that don't, that work with you all voluntarily. And we work with the FBI, of course, that responds to cybersecurity incidents and conducts investigations, and our prosecutors try to find those bad actors around the world if we have access to them, to bring them here to the United States to prosecute them. And we talked to many of you all in the private sector and said, so what can be done about this threat, because it's gone from evolving to here today, as we saw with WannaCry. Even though it didn't hit the US in ways that it hit other parts of the world. It did hit some medical devices, as far as I know. And HHS has put out some public notice that they're concerned still about the healthcare sector. So I think it comes down to two things, really, and not thinking about it in terms of carrot and sticks, but I like to think of it as pushing and pulling. How can we push and educate the private sector at the same time that you all are educating the government? And it's a two-way street, and it's learning, and we're learning about how you all use the Internet of Things, and we're learning about the threats as they evolve. And then, can we get the private sector to adopt some of these baseline security standards? But the pull is with federal procurement dollars. This isn't a new insight that our team had, but we talked to our information technology folks within DOJ, and DHS has done it with their department and others. We've talked to the GSA, and the government spends a lot of money on technology, as we should. It's not always the best technology, but as we look to connected devices, the government can have a lot of say in how those devices should be secured. And so as a major consumer of devices, we've started talking to other departments and agencies about how can we use the amount that we purchase to change the marketplace to get people to think about security. So those are not groundbreaking insights, but I think they're important to push forward at the interagency level.
Yeah, an influencing environment is extended and complicated as this is truly a challenge. Dean, I think you had some insights along how we might influence this evolving environment and what we might do.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. First, I want to kind of reiterate the cold fear you felt when you heard the demonstration of that app. And I want to talk to you about what we think about from a counterintelligence standpoint and what the intelligence community thinks about when we're thinking about the Internet of Things. And first, I want to ask everybody a question. What's this?
A light bulb.
Light bulb? No, it's not. It's not a light bulb. It does have light, has an LED in it, but what controls that LED is a microcircuit. There's a microcircuit inside the base of this bulb, And they call this a smart light bulb because it's connected to your Wi-Fi and you can turn it on from your cell phone. Look up. Every single one of those is an LED light bulb. Every single one of those is potentially connected to your internet. Is potentially connected to your internet inside your facilities, and you may not even know that you have these throughout your infrastructure already. That's what we mean by the Internet of Everything. When my light bulb can be listening to me, I have a problem, okay? So I want you to think about, when you're thinking about your infrastructure, you have to think now beyond your servers, right? And you have to do all those things. You have to do all the things he talked about. You have to do the cybersecurity. You have to have your patches that DHS was talking about. You have to have your event responsiveness. But you have to have a different way of thinking about the Internet of Things and thinking about security. Because again, when I can plug in my light bulb and I now have connected that to the Internet, I have a completely different attack vector.
Dean, I just built a smart home, so I can control my lights from my
That's right.
phone. And my pool, and my doorbell, and I'm trying to think, and my cameras around the house. And even though I was in the mind frame, or I was aware and appreciative of the potential vulnerabilities, the challenge I had is that the vendors at the time weren't there yet. So I either had to forego deploying the smartness,
Right.
or take a risk in jumping now.
So what do you do? What do you do when you're looking at building out your infrastructures? You have to take a new look at supply chain risk, right? Because this all comes down to what we're purchasing and what we're putting into our facilities. So if you don't already have a supply chain risk management process in your organization, you need one. And that supply chain risk management has to go with software supply chain. And you have to begin to think of the fact that software now includes your light bulbs, right? It's a different way of thinking than we have thought before, and things are moving so quickly that we really have to stay on top of this.
And it seems to me another aspect, again, this is all reaffirming that porosity and the boundaries and the infusion. As you were mentioning, that ADP sees themselves as an extension of your various customers. You could say, where does the boundary between ADP and your customers exist? And to what extent has that porosity now changed the awareness programs that you think you have to advance? It's one thing to get your ADP team on board and working. It's another thing if you say, well, wait a minute, by
80 million clients.
Yeah, 80 million
right?
clients. You
Yeah.
know, how does that complexity present itself?
So today, I think it's fairly easy through transparency, notification, what you're doing. But in the very near future, that changes because some of the technologies that, again, at least in our industry around human capital management is looking at is something really simple. Most of us can remember taking a time card, right? You walk into work, clunk, clunk, you know, you left work, clunk, clunk, right? That's not the way it'll work next year. When you walk through your door, you're geofenced with your phone because you have your time tracking app on you. Well, what else can that app do? So it's not just about being part of the ecosystem of my client. Their employee is now part of that ecosystem with the technology. And what's that fine line on privacy? So educating and being transparent about the technology and what it can and cannot do, having privacy engineers. So we talk about third-party risk engineers, supply risk engineers. Now we have to have privacy engineers as part of our development process to ensure we understand what the controls and checks and balances within the technology that we're developing as a supplier, essentially, can do, or should not do, and then have that discussion. And it actually goes beyond that because, Mike mentioned some of the great work that the Justice Department does and the Bureau does in this area, but think about the fraudulent perspective of how that type of technology can be used to defraud companies and small businesses and potentially put them out of business. And that's one thing, that's time clocking. Think of healthcare management, benefits management, all the other things that happen within a business. So we, our focus, and I think many of the advanced thinkers in this area are looking at fine-grained controls at a privacy, a technology, and then at that ecosystem. What do we or do not allow as part of the services we deliver?
Mike?
So I just want to pick up on that. And in the National Security Division, maybe I've spent too much time around the IC for the last few years and the intelligence community folks. But when specific examples from the private sector are mentioned, I immediately go to the worst case scenario in my thinking. And you both have mentioned some of them that come to mind, and there are technologists and other experts in the room who know more about how these threat vectors could work than I do. But to pick up on Dean's example of the light bulbs, when I walked into the hotel today, on my personal iPhone, it automatically connected me to the Four Seasons network. And I think the last time I was in a Four Seasons was September of last year, and I don't think I've ever been to this Four Seasons with this iPhone. So somewhere along the way, I consented to be on the Four Seasons Wi-Fi, probably last September in St. Louis with my wife, her hometown, and where we got married. But think about if you're a foreign adversary who's really good at getting into networks. Cybersecurity is only good as its weakest point. Could you go from the light bulbs to my personal phone? Probably. Is that something that private industry is thinking enough about? Maybe, maybe not. There's the example that comes to mind of Target, I think was hacked a few years ago through the vendor for its heating and cooling system, that they went through there eventually onto the payment information that Target was storing its customers. So it's not too far-fetched, and I've been thinking about WannaCry, but also the Dyn attack last fall. What if you combine the capabilities of ransomware with the volume of something like the Dyn attack, and think if Dyn had hit the financial industry, because we know the DDoS attacks caused some damage to the financial industry a few years ago. So.
Yeah, Dell, I was the CSO for 5 years there, and we were very acquisitive. We were out acquiring the best new intellectual property that we could, and as we bought them, candidly, we didn't always, as part of the due diligence, say, now how well have they attended or looked at security as they rolled out this really cool technology? For the most part, that's not what we were looking to buy. Michael expected me, after we bought them, to pull them in under the umbrella, which takes time, energy, and effort. And in the meantime, in a connected world, the bad guys know, hey, there's an opportunity here in that gap for us to strike in the internet of everything being connected, for us to go after Dell's greater interest, and so actually saw that playing out in the connected world. You mentioned the procurement power of the government and how that might work as an incentive to drive some of these new technology developers. I'm not sure in any of the companies that we bought that they were thinking along those lines, because again, they're just trying to get bought. That's what they've lived in. They've been working these long hours just to have the attraction of their technology. So I think we got to look at some other incentives and motivations, other avenues. Dean, I think you had some thoughts along that.
I think you're right. And if you think about the Mirai botnet and Dyn, what happened? We had Internet of Things connected devices, webcams, security cameras, other things that had essentially unpatched software in them that was wide open, right? Because when we did the acquisition, we did not put a requirement that that be a secure device before we connected it. We didn't think through the implications of that. So we really do have to refocus on supply chain, what we buy, what we put in, what we install, because these are all vectors. And I will tell you all, as members of the critical infrastructure community, from a national security perspective, you are all targets, right? You're targets not only of the hackers, right, and the criminals, but you're targets of nation-state actors, right? Nation-state actors are interested in understanding how they can compromise the critical infrastructure of the United States, and it is really incumbent on us as a community to come together and think about that, because some of these things are existential, right? If they go after the power grid, if they go after the banking sector, all you have to do is think a little bit, turn your mind a little bit, that's the way we have to do in the intelligence community, and think like an adversary, and think what you would do to bring down your network, where you would strike to bring down the critical infrastructure that you're responsible for, and you really have to think very, very defensively, right? Now, I don't want it to be too overly dramatic here. I will also point out that the vast majority of these events that come in through stupid, right? They come in through through basic network hygiene malfeasance, and and just humans clicking on links, right? Spear phishing is the most common vector to get into our networks. It's also the easiest thing to control with good training, good management, good network design. So there are things that you can do that are fairly lightweight that raise the threat wall considerably, the defense wall considerably.
Well, and that triggers a thought in my mind. A challenge that we face is we made strides in educating our community as to what they shouldn't post out on social media, because the adversaries then are harvesting that information and using that specificity to then beguile their target into clicking. And we thought we had done a good job by pushing home that message, do not click an unsolicited email, and suddenly realized in a porous world that who actually worked for us wasn't just that individual, but it was his extended network of humanity, his family, with whom he also engaged, who are out there also posting very specific pieces of information that can be just as beguiling if they're harvested and then used against him.
Remember, like pennies need to be picked up, links need to be clicked. That's just a human thing. We got to get beyond that from a technology perspective. I think as you think of advancements that have come out of In-Q-Tel and other like entities, around micro-virtualization and some of those, we have to look beyond. We have to fund them. I'm a payroll company, or a human capital management company.
There you go.
Right? We're investing in security entities who are developing technologies because we need them in the future to create the frameworks. And let's talk about the IoT and IoE. That's what we're here for with the rise of the machines. I mean, frameworks that allow us through our vendor procurement process to bring in technologies that have enabled APIs that allow us to control, monitor, and patch those type of devices are going to be a requirement in the future. Where are we investing our money and those of interest of our shareholders are critically important, but that's responsible companies in the critical infrastructure era really have to start thinking about that, because there are, and for most given purposes, for light bulb management, facilities systems control management, and I can think of 14 other things that have been there for the last 10 years that we don't know about. There are no connected infrastructure defense capabilities. So how do you enable businesses to create those? How do you fund them as new technologies and focus in those clear gap areas? I think that's an important thing that we have to focus on.
You make a good point. Does your facilities management organization think that they're part of the security organization of the company?
Before or after Target? They do now.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do now, and it's a strict protocol.
And your procurement and your acquisitions and your contracts and your contracting people, right? So it's a top to bottom, end to end approach that we have to take to solving this problem. So one of the questions we were asked in prepping for the panel is, well, what can government do? And the answer is government can't do a lot, right? We can influence through our purchasing power, right? I can make sure that we write into our contracts that unless you have the cyber equivalent of UL approved, I'm not going to buy your technology. But you all buy far more technology than we do, right? You buy, you build, and you procure technology. So it really is up to industry to figure out a way to turn cyber. I would challenge you to find a way to turn cyber safety of your products and services into a brand.
Mike, I think you mentioned just the proliferation of headlines of late, since 2013 when Target was compromised, even to this last year with the Yahoo compromise, and even this year with all the WikiLeaks leaks. You would hope that the sentiment and the appreciation out there in the general community among the end users, our CEOs, is that security is no longer the guns, gates, guards, and geeks, but it's all of us in doing that. And I guess propagating that mentality is what we're really going to be very much depending on. And I'm wondering whether a UL type certification would be something that would ultimately have, well, I guess you have to ask in the physical world, what strength and power has it ultimately wielded, and could it wield the same strength in the cyberspace?
Yeah, well, you don't know, but part of it is looking for different ways to think about this problem, right? We all use these technologies because they're convenient, right? You turn on your lights from home from your cell phone because it's convenient. You want to walk into the coffee shop and be able to walk up and have it know what your coffee order is, before you get to the counter. There's a lot of convenience in it. But we have to step back from our role as consumers and think about our role in enabling the critical infrastructure of the United States, and realize that we have to approach it more seriously than that, because we really are protecting assets that are really, the reason it's called critical infrastructure is it is critical to the economic and security of the United States.
Mike, I see your wheels turning.
Yeah, well, I've been thinking a lot about labeling, and I know DHS has as well. And in their document they put out on securing the Internet of Things in November, I think it was, they talk about software bill of particulars so that consumers and industry would at least know what's in a device. And for example, can that manufacturer say that they've checked their devices for known vulnerabilities? Something very simple. So the Europeans have talked about, encouraging labeling for these types of devices. I don't know who the first mover is going to be to really do it, and if consumers, if they'll ever move toward, like the Energy Star system, where I know that's a UL certification, and it's been tested and it's been scanned for known vulnerabilities, and so I'm going to spend the extra $5 on this device for my home that allows me to put my AC on from work or anywhere via my smartphone. I don't know if we'll get there. I think if we can, then you see market forces starting to encourage security, and one of the tasks by the Cybersecurity Commission that put out their report in December from the previous administration was to look at liability as well. So as an attorney, I'm very far from a plaintiff's attorney, but we've seen over time how technology, if liability shifts, that companies can start to change their risk calculus. Of course, it's very different in the world of software, but I know that's something that's out there on changing the market dynamics.
As I know we only have just a few minutes left, maybe we could sort of wind down with maybe closing thoughts. If you had one sort of nugget or kernel to share with the group today based on what we're discussing, what might that be as we wind down? Roland, can I put you in?
Sure. Real simple, and Dean already kind of talked on this. Preparation, right? There's things that we know we can do now and reuse existing technologies we have around certificate management, basic hygiene, and the stuff that if we are in the jobs that we're in, we should just be doing, right? So do that and prepare. The other thing is prepare your organizations. How many of you have a job description in your organizations that say, I'm an IoT, IoE security engineer? Has anyone written it? Have you gone and found someone that knows it? Do that now, because when you need one in 3 years, they're not going to be there. So if you have to build your own, create your own, prep yourself for the future now by advancing your organization to be ready.
Dean?
Yeah, I would say, from the top of your organization to the bottom of your organization, from the CEO to the service desk, you have to make this concept of protecting critical infrastructure a core mission value. It has to be one of the things you measure yourself on. It has to be one of the things you reward yourself on. Often we say, there are no rewards for preventing something. We need to find ways to reward people for preventing and securing and managing, and that helps us build trust. And with that by building trust at the lowest level, we can build it out in waves and ensure trust in the entire critical infrastructure.
Yeah, I think all that is key, and what came to mind for me just now was cyber insurance. That, I don't know if it makes sense under current policies out there for companies to purchase it. I think it depends who you are and who you're talking to. But I think at least the fact that these policies are starting to develop, I think a couple things that I would hope that the insurers look at is, do companies have incident response plans? And as part of that response plan, contacting the FBI and knowing who their local special agent in charge is, for example. Those are kind of things you can do right now if you're a company or organization. And, because at least having those conversations with the insurers gets them to know about your business, and those policies can evolve, and they can ask questions like, how many devices are connected to your network? And do you know when a device connects to your network as soon as it is connected?
I see our time is up, but clearly in a 30-minute time frame, we can only barely touch the top of the iceberg in terms of the complexity and the issues that are working here. And it's going to take, given that complexity, all of us working together our best thoughts and ideas as to how to truly grapple with this and to leverage the library, as Per said, to leverage that library and the insights and the thoughts there. So thank you for your attention. Thank you guys for participating. It was fun. Take care. We're done.
Thank you.